Fantastic. Well, thank you everyone for working with us. I think ideally, I think we're like switching to this Zoom format for the first, I have to look at the email, so I'm just not even going to say that. I think that we might use this again for set meetings in the future. So I'm going to call this meeting to order at 9:37 a.m. Thank you all for joining. Let me see, I've got a million tabs open, sorry. I'm going to start us off with a roll call. And Lucinda Sideout. Stephen Moyes. Breezy Gutierrez. Leo Delgado.
Present.
Thank you. Steve Varick.
Present.
James Poviwa.
Here.
Tom Cole. Charles Woolman.
Here.
Thank you. Anna Linden Weller.
Here.
Thank you. Sarita Nair. Aurora Martinez. Patricia Trujillo.
Here.
Okay,
Excuse me,
thank
here.
you. Shawnee Harvey, that's me, I'm present. Dana Barr, I think I might have pronounced that wrong again.
Present. Donna Bahar.
Dana Bahar, okay. Thank you. Miori.
I'm present. Thank you.
Thank you. And Stephanie Clark. Okay, thank you, everyone. Next order on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
I move we approve the agenda.
Thank you, James. Is there a second?
I
Second.
second it.
Was that Anna Linden? Thank you.
Sure.
Sorry. Okay, is there any discussion or any concerns on the agenda today? Okay, all in favor of approving the agenda, can you please raise your hand or say aye?
Aye.
Thank you. All opposed? Seeing none, our agenda does pass. Item number 3 would be to approve our minutes from the January meeting. May someone move another motion to approve the minutes from the January meeting?
Still move. This is Steve Eric.
Thank you, Steve.
James.
Second, James. Thank you, James. Is there any discussion on the minute? Did people have the ability to access the minutes from the website? We did have draft minutes through the link there for our January 18th meeting. Sorry, excuse me. Okay. Okay, all in favor of approving our minutes from the January meeting?
Aye.
Thank you. Anyone opposed? Okay, seeing none, minutes from our January meeting are approved. We'll move to item 3, which is to vote to approve our meeting minutes from, I believe, the February meeting, or it might be March. Felicia, do you know, can you help me out with this one?
I feel like that made it in there twice, so that's an accident.
Okay. So we don't need to approve minutes from March.
No, that was done last meeting.
Okay, great. Then we will go ahead and move on from that item. As you all can see, our agenda is really short today. There's not a lot that we can do as a set force body without kind of like recommendations and input from the advisory council. So what we'll do now is move into our fourth agenda item, where I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Hoviwa, who is our chair for advisory council, and he's going to provide an update for his group. And then we also have some folks on from other community organizations, including Somos Unidos, who are going to give us some updates. James?
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all. I apologize that I am not going to be on camera today. I am recovering from COVID. I hope everybody is healthy and well. As Shawnee said, we have been, diligently working at the Sustainable Economy Advisory Council, and what I'm excited to just update you all on today is some of the work that we've been doing. Over the next month, we will be, at our next meeting, which is this coming Tuesday, we'll be establishing working groups. We've talked about working groups in the past, and unfortunately, it's been a slow build towards getting them established. But now there, I think, is additional capacity and, of course, continued urgency to establish working groups that can actually get the work of the Sustainable Economy Advisory Council done and also provide recommendations to this task force. Some of the working groups that we are talking about that we'd like to establish include a Permian Basin working group, a tribal engagement working group, and several others, which will be announced this coming week. I would like to, as soon as those are published and established, invite members of this task force to participate in any one of those working groups that you would be able to lend your expertise to. I know that as state appointees, each one of you are incredibly busy. So we hope that the working groups will be added capacity to your efforts. Each one of my committee members on SEEK will be required to sit on a working group. We're also going to vote on guiding principles for the SEEK on the way that we approach the work. We'll talk about that a little bit more in the two presentations that are going to happen in just a couple minutes here. The other thing is we'll also be requiring our SEEK members to agree to attend at least 3 meetings to ensure that we have adequate participation in the group. Final thing that I wanted to let you all know is I will be starting to host our Sustainable Economy Advisory Council meetings in regions throughout the state, and we'll be reaching out to each one of your departments with the opportunity to participate in those on-site. They'll be hybrid of a virtual and in-person participation. But I think it's really helpful and part of the mission of SEEK to engage with our communities across New Mexico. The 2 areas that I'm very excited to get on the books as soon as possible for those first in-person virtual meetings are in the Permian Basin, and then later on in northwestern New Mexico and the San Juan Basin. So more on that to come. I'd like to invite 2 really wonderful advocates from who have been very engaged with the Sustainable Economy Advisory Council, and in one case, the establishment of SETForce. So I have today invited Marcela Diaz, who is the Executive Director of Somos Un Pueblo Unido, to present on the gains that were made in this last legislative session, especially through funding and budget allocation. The second presenter that will follow Marcela is Tom Singer, who is with the Western Environmental Law Center, and will be speaking about work that's been done in advocacy around the Opportunity Investment Fund. So without further ado, I also wanted to recognize that Representative Angelica Rubio is here today. Thank you for joining us, Representative. And without further ado, Marcella, do you want to go ahead and jump into your presentation?
Sure, thank you, co-chair. Povijua. Marcela Diaz with Somos Un Pueblo Unido. For those of you who don't know Somos, we are an organization that has been around for 27 years. We're in 8 counties. We organize a lot in rural communities, and we've just done a lot of legislative advocacy work over the years around economic justice issues and immigrants' rights issues and racial justice issues. And so we are a part of a larger coalition called Power for NM. Together, we represent New Mexico's frontline communities in several counties that are directly impacted by climate policy, by diversification issues, by our economy and our reliance on oil and gas. I just want to recognize on the call today that we have Diana from Somos, Maria Romano, who is in Hobbs, Gladys, and Eduviges Hernandez, also from Hobbs. They are leading our incredible work in Hobbs and in the Permian Basin, and have organized many immigrant oil and gas workers around Energy Transition Act, around the Sustainable Economy Task Force that, this, as well as SEEK. And so that's who we are. We wanted to just, and I think I've been on this call before to talk a little bit about our bill, the Energy Transition Act, which would have created the Energy Transition Division under EDD, House Bill 188, that then morphed into House Bill 12, almost fully intact. And it did not pass, but I wanted to give just a reminder to everyone what the key components of that were, because I think we are still full steam ahead with most of the components through the budget. And then I would like to just briefly turn it over if Representative Angelica Rubio is interested in saying a few words about it. But basically, House Bill 188, House Bill 12 would have done 3 major things. And we know because we were a part of, as was Representative Rubio and the folks from southeastern New Mexico in helping construct and co-write that, with a lot of input from some of the agencies represented here today. It would have basically created an economic transition division under EDD, and it would have hired, or it would have put about $3 million for admin support, as well as a director and I guess like a deputy director or someone who could support the director to build capacity here for SETForce and SEEK and all the transition initiatives that you embark on. And the second thing is it would have created a $10 million fund, which for us was a seed fund that would be able to be used by various agencies to support some of the programmatic work that was needed to build infrastructure, workforce development infrastructure, social infrastructure in frontline communities, namely the San Juan Basin and the Permian Basin. And that was $10 million. And then the third piece is to expand the SEEK, the Advisory Council. It is, numbered at this point. There's a lot of really great representation on SEEK, but there is not a lot of there's actually no representation from the Permian Basin, from worker organizations or higher education, workforce development programs. And so we were really wanting to make sure that there was good, adequate representation from the Permian Basin. So of those 3 things, we didn't get the third one, but we believe through the budget, we've got the first 2. And so I just wanted to quickly share a screen that I'm happy to send to co-chair Harvey if you want to share with the other folks that are on this call. Let's see if I can do this. Share screen, share screen. Hopefully you can all see this. This is something that Somos put together with the help of LFC. These are some of the economic transition funds that we were able to get because of Representative Rubio, the Speaker, Representative Ortiz, Representative or Vice Chair of the House Appropriation Committee, Meredith Dixon, and Chair Nathan Small. And so even though our bill didn't get through, a lot of the funding that we were requesting through the bill, we believe, and it is described to us is in this, and Representative Rubio can talk a little bit about this. But basically there's $50 million specifically for economic development projects, including border planning and infrastructure projects, advanced energy projects, economic transition initiatives, program administration, and staffing through fiscal year 2027. And this includes the breakdown. There's funding there for MNERD, for the Department, for the Environment Department, the Mexico Finance Authority, the Department of Workforce Solutions, and we're in a lot of really wonderful discussions with Secretary Nair about how to utilize some of that funding. And also the Economic Development Department. There's about 37 million for that broader definition, right? Economic development projects, border planning, advanced energy, economic transition initiatives. All of this is to support those key workforce development and diversification projects. And so that's the breakdown. We also saw additional funding appropriated to assist for DWS through the ETA, the Indian Affairs Department, EDD, specifically to support transition work and support for transitioning workers in San Juan County. And you'll see that there's close to 15 million for DWS. There's 2.5 million for the Indian Affairs Department to assist tribal and Native people in affected communities pursuant to the ETA, and for EDD to assist in diversifying and promoting the economy of communities affected by the closure of fossil fuel plants by fostering economic development unrelated to fossil fuel development. That's the language in the budget. The other thing that that we were excited because LEDA, it got about a 13 million appropriation, and sort of at the last minute, because we were following all of the budget discussions in Senate Finance, there was language included that said including energy transition assistance. And while all of this, including the 50 million to EDD, was largely untouched by the governor's veto pen, though there was these four words that were touched by the governor's veto pen. And so she took out including energy transition assistance. But the truth is LEDA is very broad. And so, who knows how LEDA, how EDD can, we imagine that they can use the funding through LEDA to help support all of these initiatives. Not quite sure why the governor struck that out, but there it is. And so I'll share this with co-chair Harvey, and she can get it out to you. And you're all agency people, so you already know this, but we shared this with SEEK because we are very excited that frontline communities, people most impacted by the current industry and by our eventual transition, namely the folks in the Permian Basin, we're starting to see some real traction with legislators to help understand that any of these efforts will impact the livelihood and will impact the lives of a lot of people who have been giving so much to our communities in these last decades and who have been really at a major disadvantage because of the way that the industry treats our communities. So that's kind of the broad picture. And then if Representative Rubio, would be great for you to chime in and to talk about any of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Marcela, and thank you all. I appreciate just an opportunity to talk a little bit about this. I'm really excited about the possibilities of what we were able to accomplish this session. Just to remind folks a little bit that what we were able to get in terms of investment this year is really a culmination of work that's been happening for the last 4 years. What you have with SetForce, what you have with the Advisory Council, everything, the workforce development study that was done a few years back, and then the funding we were able to get this year to collaborate with the Department of Workforce Solutions. I just want to remind you all that it's all a culmination and a big part of that picture. And so I'm really excited about the investments that were made. I know that there's been a lot of work that you all have been wanting to pursue that was just sort of impossible because you all are really taking time out of your day on voluntarily to be able to be a part of this. And to now have these investments, I think will be sort of this first step in really tackling this issue of economic transition and economic diversification away from industries that we know will not be a part of our future for much longer. And so I just want to just take the moment to thank you all, appreciate all of the support, and also a lot of the collaboration that was done over the course of the session. There was, with a lot of the transitions in leadership and just in terms of sort of this new phase in my own legislative career and those of others. I'm really happy to have so many folks from the community being part of this effort, and so I just wanted to thank you all, and if there's any specifics that I can try to answer, I'm happy to do that, and we'll definitely stay on for I'd say another half hour or so.
Thank you, Representative, and thank you, Marcella, for those numbers and that breakdown. I just wanted to say I think like it's a really good opportunity for both these groups, especially for the advisory council, if there is thoughts on like what some of those projects look like. I think that this is the perfect opportunity for the advisory council to be able to kind of put together some of those recommendations and suggestions on who the players are that are looking at those projects closely and what those projects look like, so that as our leadership starts to look at how they're going to administer those programs and administer those dollars, that we have the community engagement and feedback that's already set out for them. Because if the best way to do it, I guess I'm going to say, is to like get out ahead of it if we can. So this is really exciting, and I'd love to have an opportunity to kind of talk about thoughts around how LEDA investment might be able to promote economic transition. LEDA is such an interesting program, and for us in the JEDI office, we don't deal directly with LEDA. We like lead them into the regional reps, but because it's so focused on like manufacturing and e-commerce, and maybe not as much of like that oil and gas and mining, it would be an interesting conversation to kind of talk about what that would look like and what those companies look like and what those projects look like, so that we might be able to go to EDD leadership with a baseline of like, this is what economic transition could look like applied to LEDA. If we can kind of maybe work collaboratively to look at some of those ideas, I'd be super open to doing that. And sorry to jump in on that time, but thank you both. Really appreciate it, and absolutely looking forward to that breakdown. Marcella, thank you. It's so nice when it's in an Excel sheet and I don't have to read through hundreds of pages of HB2 appropriations and try and figure out what goes where. So thank you. Anna Linden, I see your hand raised.
Hi, I think I'm jumping on your bandwagon a bit. And I just wanted to say that one of the things that MNERD is thinking about with that pot of money that you were talking about, Marcella, is working out how we want to encourage the development of a geothermal industry, and especially with a view toward that being a place for oil and gas workers to use their skills in a industry that's about to take off and grow. So that's something that I think that we should maybe get together and talk about. And that's both a request for Somos and a request for EDD and Workforce Solutions, as we start thinking about how we can support that industry and also the people who have the skill set to make that industry work in New Mexico.
That would be great. Thank you. James?
Shadi, no, I didn't want to shut down any questions that there may be at this portion of the presentation, but also wanted to note that I think another portion of this is really informative that Tom Singer will be able to expand on with New Mexico, with some other areas. Great, so I'll go ahead and turn it over to Tom. Please proceed.
Yeah, do I have screen share capability?
Yes, you should.
Okay. So can folks see the slides here?
Perfect. Yes, we do see it's
Yes.
not in your presentation mode though.
I don't, I'm not that
You're-
knowledgeable. What's presentation mode?
It just means we can see all your slides, but we can see the slide just fine.
Is there some button I should push that's presentation mode?
Um,
How do you
sure,
think
up,
slideshow?
yeah, up
Slide-
at the top in your
Go up to
orange
slideshow.
options.
The tabs way at the top in orange.
Yeah, I'm not seeing that, so I'm not gonna mess with that right now.
I think it's fine. In the interest of time,
No
we can
problem.
see everything.
Yeah, sorry about that. So I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that this is a nice complementary presentation to Marcella's. And I want to talk about putting New Mexico's economic development programs to work for a sustainable and diversified economy. And I'd note that transition and diversification are related concepts. They are first cousins. Diversifying the New Mexico economy and the transition from oil and gas into more sustainable sectors is sort of what we're all focused on. Today, I want to talk about the Opportunity Enterprise Fund. There are many development programs I'm going to touch on. I'll try to go quickly. But the Opportunity Enterprise revolving fund I think, can serve as a model for many of these other programs. And for what we've been talking about so far. This fund was created by statute in 2022. It received an appropriation of $70 million in that legislative session. It's housed within EDD, but it's managed by NMFA, and so far there's a very close partnership between the two agencies in that program. You can read its purpose there. I won't read it. But they just completed a rulemaking and an establishment of a policy for prioritizing the allocation of that money. And applications are going to be accepted, hopefully, they're thinking by next month, they'll start taking applications. WELC worked with a large group of a coalition of groups, environmental groups, fiscal policy, and just transition groups. Now I'm running into trouble because I'll read my slides off of paper. And we developed a set of principles for how this Opportunity Enterprise Fund money should be allocated or screens. And we argued to the OEF board that let me bump that up. Sort of a general set of principles for all economic development or development finance. Program should help diversify the New Mexico economy, support environmental sustainability, require local community engagement and support, and provide tangible local community benefits. We provided testimony at hearings of the Opportunity Enterprise Review Board on their rule, which governs the management of this program. And we also submitted comments on prioritization policy, a very extensive prioritization policy that NMFA proposed that we loved it, but we wanted a lot more detail, a lot more specific so that implementation was more straightforward. And I'll just flag groups like Center for Civic Policy, Interfaith Power and Light, San Juan Citizens Alliance. We're all in the transition diversification space. We, WELC, and others there, of course, were in the environmental space. New Mexico Voices for Children was our sort of expert partner on fiscal policy and the need for revenue diversification. The final rule that the board adopted, the Opportunity Enterprise Board adopted, is on the screen now, and highlighted are things that they added, and we are very grateful that they added to the rule. The demonstrate local support was in there, but they added C, contribution to diversification of the state's economy, and D, advance environmentally sustainable economic development goals of the state. That's statutory language. We wanted it in there so that when they start receiving applications for those funds, these are the screens, these are the criteria standards that they have to look at. The community benefit material was added in the prioritization policy. So we've identified 6 other programs, and there are individuals from other agencies here that cover some of these programs that are additional state development finance programs that we hope will work towards a sustainable and diversified economy. And we'd like to see them adopt these policies and perhaps others and more specific ones related to just transition. I won't go through these slides. I think I'll just pause and let people read the material. You're probably familiar with most of them. So the first set of funds is the ETA transition funds, which were appropriated this past session, as Marcella detailed. And there's plenty to be said about that, but again, getting that money put to work for these purposes is what we're hoping for. And then, as mentioned earlier, there's LEDA, and my last slides, I'll get to sort of what the set force could do and the program managers could do in getting these funds targeted towards these purposes. Another program, a very large program, is the State Small Business Credit Initiative. This is housed in EDD, and it is outsourced. The management is outsourced. It's a tremendous amount of money, and it's supposed to be focused on very small businesses and businesses owned by socially and economically disadvantaged individuals. It's a federal program out of the Federal Treasury Department that's passed through EDD. We have high hopes for this program in the transition or diversification space. A new program that's quite large and is emerging. There'll be a rulemaking on this now that the Opportunity Fund is done. That's the New Mexico Venture Capital Fund. They've got $50 million. They got an additional appropriation last session of 15 on top of the original 35. Again, development finance able to support the goals of diversification, transition, et cetera. A huge program that is more market-based and income-generating focused, but very large and with an economic development component is the New Mexico Private Equity Investment Program within the State Investment Office. And you can read the purpose there. I've italicized that they're supposed to, follow the economic development objectives of the state. I see that Charles Wallman's on. Charles, we haven't met, but I see that you're on. I've had a heck of a time finding out what the total principal in the Severance Tax Permanent Fund is today. But 11% of that is available. I think maybe $500 million is currently invested from that program. If you're able to pop on and tell us how much is in that fund, I can't keep up with it given the oil and gas revenue lately. Do you know that off the top of your head?
Hi, Tom. Off top of my head, I think we're at about $7.5 billion, but that is off top of my head. And by policy, we can invest up to 9% of the severance tax fund into essentially. I don't think we're going to ever be doing direct investments into companies. We've been there and done that. It hasn't worked. Right. But I do believe that we are working towards expanding things. Now, one of the focuses of that program is tech transfer. And that is certainly an area we're focusing on in statute. That is actually one of the main goals of this program.
Right. Thank you so much. So that would be 9% would be something under 700 million. And
right. Definitely something to keep in mind. We are anticipating extremely large inflows in the coming years. And so we're working around how we best expand this program and what it does. We're expecting billions of dollars to flow into the Severance Tax Permanent Fund. And so it's a critical fund for New Mexico because it produces hundreds of millions of dollars for the general fund every year. But certainly this is a high profile program. We have made some investments of note lately, $100 million to
Yes.
America's America's Frontier
American
Fund.
Frontier Fund?
Right. And then there's some others, national venture firms that we've invested in. So we're expecting some big things, and we're excited with how this program is kind of developing. We're also working too with NMFA as well as EDD on their programs, just trying to give them our thoughts. So, there should be some dovetailing of these programs and, synergies to achieve.
I really appreciate that. And just so you know, and folks, I worked on the Alaska Permanent Fund, heavy emphasis on permanent and the Permanent Fund Dividend Program. And I appreciate the need for this fund to be prudent and to generate income to support the budget. So, the degree of risk that this fund can take on is the topic of conversation, I suppose. But again, just to emphasize, the state small business investment, state small business credit, I'm now even forgetting the name, the credit initiative, the venture in New Mexico, and that's in EDD, the venture capital fund in NMFA, and this program, all, I believe their strategy is to invest in venture funds, or if not early stage, some level of venture sum investing. So they're not directly placing money in New Mexico projects or companies, but they're placing money with funds that then invest in New Mexico companies. Kevin Robinson Avila did a very good story on the SIC placements in funds, if people want to get a feel for what they're doing. But I think this is all relevant to the SEEK and the set force and this question of diversifying the New Mexico economy. Within the SIC is the New Mexico Catalyst Fund, and we don't need to dwell on it, but yet another venture fund. And so the last slide is sort of a nod to the state economic development plan. I want to recognize, that the state has a statewide strategic plan developed by EDD. That's very much an outgrowth of was it SB 112 back in the day that started all of this process, and the idea of diversification, transition, etc. The Opportunity Enterprise Review Board members spoke at length about the statewide plan and the need to diversify the economy. So at least within that lending entity, development finance entity, there was a wonderful recognition of the importance of diversification. Here are the sectors. Now, this is a living document, but I think I want to make 2 points and then I'll close. Outreach by these entities to these sectors is going to be critical. Certainly, the Opportunity Enterprise Fund by statute is required to do outreach to find investments and find enterprises or projects to seek funding from them. I think all of these funds have an obligation to proactively seek out potential projects or investments in these sectors. And then again, a pitch for the principles that we started with. And I suppose I can go back to them after folks have digested this slide, that what we think is good state economic development policy and reflects the governor's policies, and the plan state policies, is to embed these kinds of screens or these kinds of policies in the decision making for placement of funds for all of these funds. So with that, I'll just stop and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Tom. One point that I did want to make, and I really appreciate the points that you made and the principles around how these funds should be made. I mean, I think something that SEEK members and advocates also all agree on is that these should be as much as possible community driven, to ensure that voices from across the state, especially from communities that are directly impacted by energy transition, economic transition, or even just the lack of economic development in communities, are elevated.
Representative?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Tom, for that that presentation. And that was one of the questions that I was going to ask as it pertains to community involvement in this process. Is there a mechanism that already exists to bring in communities? And I'm thinking in terms of like the Permian Basin. I know that there's a lot of work happening down there around what economic diversification looks like for communities if and when the oil and gas industry is no longer there. So I'm just curious as to what mechanisms exist there, and if they do exist, what is it that is being heard that could help to provide some of these opportunities for them as well.
I would defer to the agency folks on the call after I give a general answer, generic answer, and that is, again, this question of outreach. I know there is a sort of an economic development ecosystem out there of economic development professionals. All of these programs, particularly something like the Opportunity Enterprise Fund or the Venture Capital Fund, the window will be open for applications. And the question is, who knows about these programs to even apply, or LEDA for that matter. And so I think the outreach, the outreach efforts by these agencies into business associations, chambers of commerce, these sectors that the diversification plan identifies is a very important piece of this. With respect to the Opportunity Enterprise Fund, and also parenthetically, the WISH proposal and the hydrogen projects that may get funded by the federal government and may come to New Mexico, there's an obligation on project developers, on applicants, to do outreach to the community, which is different than agencies saying, we've got this program, come get the money. This is a project developer or a borrower saying, we want to do X, Y, or Z project in your community. We're going to talk to you about it. We're going to have, public meetings or other kinds of engagement. That's for others who are in that world, like yourself and Marcella, to guide us how we can help with that. So, agency obligations, borrower or project developer obligations. Beyond that, I'm all ears, and if you all have ideas, I think the agencies would benefit from hearing that.
This is Steve Verk. Sorry, I'm not adept at finding the raised hand symbol, so my apologies for that. I just had a couple of thoughts. I think this is really, really good stuff here. And so just a few thoughts from the State Land Office and economic development perspective. And I find, Tom, I feel like this is really a good synopsis, the new, and I feel legislature looks like they've done some really good stuff in terms of not only putting dollars, but structuring programs, both in terms of, early stage ventures, and also even, LEDA related, as referred to earlier by Marcel, I believe it was, investments. And so it looks, there's a lot more money that can be, hopefully it's well placed, in terms of these ventures. But in terms of an area and opportunity that I think a lot of us see, we certainly see it, State Land Office would be. So right now, as you look at particularly wind and solar, and Anna Linden, I think, had mentioned, geothermal, which just looks like it's not a lot out there, but a lot of potential, as a state would be. It's a situation right now where, as developers are bringing these projects in, and Pattern would be the big example. We just did 170,000 acres and 14 leases with them. But the whole project was like 500,000 acres of land with hundreds of turbines. You know, those turbines and also solar devices are almost entirely coming from outside the state right now, right? So when these projects come in, there's a lot of growth in terms of development. And so there's a lot of jobs in terms of the installation of these facilities, but of course they're short term. Once those facilities are fully installed, there are very few operational jobs connected with them, and certainly not anywhere near the level to go ahead and replace the jobs that are being lost right now, you know, has been referred to. So I think we know we need to move up the value chain in terms of not only doing the installation and a few workers doing maintenance, but we've got to be able to get to where we're doing production of turbines, we're doing production of solar devices, we're moving upscale even beyond that, right? In terms of, I mean, Sandia in particular has done a bunch of work in terms of controls, which are really good at measurement, things like that of renewable energy. And so I'm hoping that some of those dollars will get directed to some of those enterprises, including micro enterprises, you know, that can help bring some of those jobs into New Mexico versus everything's coming, the higher value added stuff is almost entirely coming from outside the state at this point. And so I like these programs, you know, I think they're going to help a lot, but it's not happening right now. And I felt like EDD, I was glad to see was it the turbine manufacturer project? I think with Los Lunas. I mean, I think they used some LEDA money there. I mean, I think that's a really good example, right? Where there's enough scale now before, and we're kind of at the edge of, let's say, the primary wind zones, even though we've got some great wind zones in the state. But as we get more and more projects, you know, we reach that threshold where it's like, hey, we could put a manufacturing plant here now with good paying, good quality jobs and help replace some of these, you know, jobs that are being lost. So I'm just, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I hope these things are well placed. I know SIC is working on this as well. Anyways, that was really my point, would be just maybe a tangible example of an area of opportunity that isn't being taken advantage of right now, although it looks like there's some rumblings, you know, that we're going to see some facilities and jobs in the state, you know, related to the growth in renewable generation.
Thank you, Mr. Varick. Marcella?
Thank you. I so appreciate this conversation, and I love to always hear about some of the great programs that are popping up in and around the state. I want to say two things. One, Somos un Pueblo Unido is working with the UNM Center for Social Research on a very big community-based, participatory-based study on, you know, not just the current conditions for oil and gas workers, particularly immigrant oil and gas workers in the Permian Basin, but also a deeper dive into, one, what immigrant oil and gas workers, what the barriers are for workforce development opportunities across the spectrum in being able to just even prepare, and what kinds of investments are needed in the Permian Basin to prepare all of these primarily immigrant oil and gas workers for all of the different kinds of opportunities in these new emerging industries. And there are a lot of barriers. And one of the number one barriers, there are two major barriers that we've already identified. And that's one, that we're working 12 to 14 to 16-hour days. And so there's very little room right now to be able to start developing some of those transferable skills. But then also there is a dearth of workforce development opportunities and social infrastructure for that in the Permian Basin, because that corridor is so chiefly reliant on one industry. And so we're teasing that out and really doing that deep dive with UNM. So that is a tool that is really coming from workers and community, to Representative Rubio's point, that we can offer the state, that will continue to offer this committee and SEEK, or this task force. The second thing is that we are in really good discussions with the Department of Workforce Solutions. I don't think anyone is on the call from DWS right now, but we've had a lot of really great conversations with Secretary Nair about really thinking about the investments that are needed right now in that community to prepare the Permian Basin workforce for the opportunities that are to come, so that we don't have to leave in 15 years, the communities that our members have developed strong ties to and have grown deep roots in. And so those are the two things that we're working on right now. And DWS is doing a feasibility study on expansion of unemployment, not just for currently excluded workers, but also that's one of the other things that we won in the budget this year. And we'll continue to work with DWS and UNM on that, explore wage differentials and other things for transitioning workers, but really doing that deep dive. What are all of the other necessary components to helping build that infrastructure? And I do see NMHD on there. We've had really wonderful discussions with the ABE department at HED. To really think through what some of what all the workforce development needs are, including for immigrant oil and gas workers and their families, ESL class expansion, citizenship class expansion, expansion of Spanish GED. So it really is a very broad gamut of things that need to happen in the Southeast in the next 5 to 10 years, so that so that our workforce is ready to move into those other industries.
I may piggyback really quickly, Marcela. This is Patricia from HED. Is in addition to adult education, understanding the critical impact of the Opportunity Scholarship in supporting immigrant workers in this area. Immigrant workers are eligible for the Opportunity Scholarship to skill up in career trades fields, so stackable certificates and AA, even up to a BA. And then also knowing that I was looking at a map and trying to figure out which higher ed institutions are in that Permian Basin. But so of course we have Southeast New Mexico Community College, which used to be NMSU Carlsbad. But we do also have some of our ENMU campuses that are closer by, who are working on, for instance, developing or expanding programs that they have in such things as wind energy. So also as we move forward with these conversations, making sure to always keep higher ed in the conversation so that we can, first of all, share the good work that's already occurring at our institutions, but also, I know as we do the work, we're going to find those critical infrastructure gaps that we will also need to start addressing with the institutions. And so I'm also really learning a lot in this conversation, and I'm thankful for it.
Thank you, Patricia, and thank you, Thomas, for that presentation. I wanted to say something kind of about that marketing piece that Representative Rubio, who's no longer on the call, had mentioned, but part of the work that my team and staff is doing in the JEDI office under EDD is trying to develop that marketing content and really have a good basis of like what the programs are, when they're going to be open, how people need to apply, what does that eligibility information look like, what's going to be needed, and then be able to connect deeply with the different community partners and resources and services to push that information out in a multitude of ways. I think for us, we are going to try and lean more into being able to put short, consumable, easy to understand content together for people. So it's not maybe only in an email blast. Maybe we do a video that's available bilingually to kind of get information out to the community and do it in a way that is like more social media friendly and more accessible from in different ways. So we'll be working on that. And I think, James, if it would be helpful, for example, for like JEDI team to keep an eye on the 6 programs that Mr. Singer mentioned in his presentation, we might be able to gather some of those details to be able to talk to like the advisory council about what that looks like, and what those programs look like, and really what they're looking for when it comes to those businesses and firms and funds that are going to be applying. For SSBCI, for the State Small Business Credit Initiative, those funds are going, the first tranche, it's 70 million over like 74 million over 10 years, but the first tranche is going specifically into venture capital and our collateral assistance program. So that first tranche has kind of been spoken for. And that's all I'll say about that. I'm hoping that there's going to be some flexibility on the future tranches where we can kind of look at some different tools that might be better for the New Mexico landscape. But currently those funds like haven't been allocated directly through NMFA to funds at this point. So that money is like not available for applications. But once those programs are available and there's actually a place for businesses to directly apply, that's something that my team is trying to work on, making sure that we know who the players are and who needs to have that information, so that when it becomes available, we can push it out through our channels and share with everyone so that they can also push it out through their channels, and we can get it like across New Mexico, and not just for the people who are like signed up on a state government email list, because not everyone wants those emails. And I totally understand that. That's what I wanted to comment on that piece. But I think for that community engagement, if that would be helpful for us to kind of pull some of those programs and talk to the advisory council on it. And if they have feedback on, you know, who the people are that we should be pushing that information to, that would be incredibly helpful. James.
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I appreciate it. And also thank you for your leadership. And yeah, I think this is all really gives me a lot of optimism for the work that we can do together, both the amazing work that our state agency representatives are doing and through the efforts of advocacy organizations and SEEK. I definitely think that the communications component and what you mentioned, Chair, for monitoring some of these things are important. You know, the other thing within this is allocation for funding that should go to support the work of this task force and for SEEK. And, you know, I hope that, you know, you all have at NMEDD additional supports, whether it's additional FTDs or hours for existing staff members to be able to contribute to support the work of SEEK and SetForce, that happens in 2024. I also hope that we can work to get our communications platforms more robust, whether it is building out the website at NMEDD to be a more robust place to generate the efforts and amplify the efforts of SEEK and SetForce, or potentially establishing its own website. I think that we can definitely make a lot of gains in community engagement through online activities. And I also here wanted to thank Somos un Pueblo Unido for two things, and that is offering the loan of their Zoom, and also for providing at their own expense gratis language interpretation. And I want to elevate how important that is for us to ensure that we're reaching all communities in the state. So I'm very excited. Last thing that I'll say is to make a final plug for the working groups that I am establishing through my committee. And I also wanted to open it up to any SetForce members who may have suggestions on committees that you believe would be helpful. So these are working groups that will engage on specific issues that are related to long-term economic development, just economic development for the state, and, you know, reaching the goals that we are in statute required to do. So please, if you have any specific working groups that you would like to see established, I'm very open to that.
Yeah, and just as a formality, I'm gonna say that we're gonna close on item 4 on our agenda. We're gonna move into public comment. So if we would like to open it up for public comment and members of the SetForce to speak further about that last topic that Chair Poviwa brought up on the working groups. I have noted here you were talking about tribal engagement working group, a Permian Basin working group, and was there a third one that you had mentioned?
Those are the two initial ones. We had made recommendations, but they're over a year old. So I'm open to new suggestions.
The comment in the chat from Marcella on the Permian Basin Working Group. I thought it was really interesting, the comment actually that you had made in your presentation towards the beginning. I have it highlighted in red that there's no representation for the Permian Basin on SEEK. And I think that that might be a discussion that I can have with like with our leadership, with our cabinet leadership, and then with James to see if there's something that we can either do about that or shift a seat or add a seat. I don't really know how it works because it's all statutory and whatever. I don't know if they'll be like, you can't add a chair. So we'll see. But I will look into that because I think there was it was very intentional that there's representation from all over the state. So I think it might just be oversight, which happens. So
Thank you, Chair Harvey. I love that. We should have that conversation.
right. Is there any?
Yeah, this Steve Varick again, the one who's not functionally unable to raise his hand. My apologies for that. I just had another thought. I mean, there's some really good suggestions here, but so one suggestion, and maybe those on the line are well past this, but it seems like a pretty important thing to do. So, you know, as you know, when you read the economic development plan for the state with this, what is the word is 7 or 9 target industries, and you read the sustainable economy, you know, component to that, a big key would be these target sector working groups. I forget the terms of the industry councils. I forget what the term is, but you know, where you not only have a plan that in many cases just on the shelf, but you have an ability to be able to bridge all the different interests between and get labor and disadvantaged communities, but also the industry and business people, right? Bridged together where people can communicate because, you know, where some of the groups that are talking today can talk about, okay, look, we've got a great resource here in terms of people and interest in working these things. They need to make a shift from traditional energy industries, perhaps in Lee County or Eddy or San Juan. And then the industry people saying, hey, our company, we're, you know, worldwide. We know we're going to be building a few new manufacturing plants, you know, and so I'm not sure that we're really availing ourselves of this opportunity. I mean, there's a lot of good working groups, but the core ones within the plan itself would be these sector groups who would look at, let's say, green energy or outdoor recreation, right? And be able to get everybody connected. And because I'm not sure that's really happening right now. I think sometimes we tend to speak to our own groups. And for this thing to really succeed, we've got to get everybody pretty much under the tent, right? Talking about, hey, here's an opportunity. People saying, yeah, that's of interest to us, it's not of interest to us, or if you modify it in this way, you know, and then so we could get more of these economic opportunities into our state versus right now what's happening is they're tending to park in Colorado, Arizona, Texas, and to move them into our communities, which is what we need to do in order to make up for these jobs that are being lost and be able to provide good economic opportunities for everyone. We need to be able to talk and do early identification of these opportunities. And so, like on the green energy side, for instance, you know, they've got these trade associations, and there's several, but like the Renewable Energy Association, Solar Association, those people really need to be engaged, I think, as well, where we're talking like, hey, we've got this interest, our groups are looking at it right now, and I don't really see a lot of evidence that's taking place, and maybe because I'm just missing it. But until we do that, I just don't think we're going to fully optimize, you know, the economic opportunities that we could bring to the state.
Thank you, Steve. Thomas.
Yeah, Madam Chair, can I have a follow-up question with Steve on that?
Sure.
I think you'd mentioned industry councils, and I'm just wondering if there's sort of an institutional model that you're aware of that brings all the different stakeholders together around a particular sector. Is there something out there that does that for somebody?
Steve, do you have an answer for that? Because I have thoughts, but
yeah, I
Oh,
would,
wait.
Tom, I wish I did. I really don't. I just
Okay.
know from, you know, reading the plan, it calls for those, I think that's the term, right? Industry counselors or something. It calls for a council for each of these targets where all the major groups are engaged. And so I don't have a good model, and I'm not sure one is out there right now, but I feel like it's a really critical part for all of us to be successful would be to get us all working together. And I think that was what those were intended to do in the strategy, but I may be wrong. So Jenny, you may know more from the EDD side in terms of, is there a good model out of those 7 or 9 working groups that's been developed?
Yeah, that's a good question, and like not off the top of my head, James, I see your hand, but I'm gonna try and talk through this just for what's coming to mind for me, because I know that so I wasn't highly involved in the development of the state plan, more so on just that community engagement piece. And employees knocking, friends knocking on the window, coworkers. I think that it would be interesting if we could find some of those trade groups or industry councils, and if there's a space there for potentially like the advisory council or the advisory council, once it establishes its working groups, to kind of bring some of those minds together and like administratively, Jedi office could help try and foster those connections. But I think it would be good to like pull that in, because I think the stuff that would come out of those groups would be recommendations that could go to set, that could go up through those leaderships of each of the agencies that we have representation for here. So I don't know exactly how it would look. But like, I'm absolutely open to trying to figure out a way to do that. I don't know if that directly answered the question. But there's my thoughts. James?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, Chair Harvey. And Steve, I believe it is, pardon if I've gotten your name wrong. Thank you for just highlighting the opportunity here. It's right, like we have that I think is the intent of Seek and Set Force, is to be able to bring many different groups together to have these discussions. And prior to Chair Harvey's chairwomanship with a Set Force, I know that Johanna had been really optimistic about engaging the COGS, which I hope to do as well. And I think that's a really good opportunity to have both community and business interests sitting at the same table. I think point well taken that the working groups can mirror some of the industry focuses. So I will definitely take that back and review. And Steve, looking forward, I hope you don't mind if I follow up with you offline to get more of your thoughts.
Yeah, great points. I'm glad to help however I can.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
James, I think it's an interesting kind of segue, because I think I saw a comment, I think from Mr. Singer in the chat around like some of the green chambers and other organizations that might be helpful to connect with. And I think that the advisory council's ability, either as a full council or as those working groups, to meet with those chambers and with those groups, to pull what those needs are and pull what the recommendations are, or the kinds of projects that they're looking at, that kind of information could be collated and then somehow shifted to this group, and then that way. So I think like meeting with some of those groups is going to be probably critical and very helpful as well. But again, like if people have suggestions, we are like these are both public bodies, so like my information is always public. If people have suggestions on who we need to be talking to and who good presenters would be, etc., it would be great to get that in to figure it out. I think from my standpoint, I want to take another look at really what each of these groups is tasked with, the task force versus the advisory council, so we can figure out which groups should present to who and how that information should be taken to the next level.
That's a really excellent idea, Chair Harvey. May I create a little space here as well, if it's okay? Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that we have a lot of organizations on the call today, and just ensure that any of our community partners, since this is the Q&A, the public comment portion, if there are any folks who have not been able to speak yet, to ask any questions or make any comments. If not, please feel free to interrupt.
Yeah. Thank you for that, James. Yeah, we are absolutely in public our public comment. Sorry, it's all like internal people talking. But if there is no one who wants to speak on that, I'll pass it back over to Thomas.
And I'm happy to be interrupted or take a back seat to anybody else. I just want to flag for you, Chairwoman, and some of the other state folks. I'm working with Tom Solomon of 350.org, New Mexico, with the information that you can get from the renewables trade associations. There's several wind company associations and several solar company associations. And of course, Tom is heavily involved in geothermal as well. We're identifying companies, moving up that value chain, as the State Land Office mentioned. So we'll be providing that information. We'll be reaching out to you, Chairwoman Harvey, with information about what the trade associations can bring in terms of this outreach and connectivity, and what firms are active in New Mexico or looking at New Mexico that you state agencies might not be aware of. So we'll be in touch about that.
That would be great. And I think I had also wanted to say on like that LIDA piece, any of that manufacturing where it's like sustainable and green energy, if people are going to start talking about doing wind turbines or solar manufacturing, any of that stuff, a lot of that is most likely LIDA eligible. There's a weird process that people go through and the forms and whatever, and the funding of the actual program is discretionary at like the cabinet level. But that kind of work, if there's big companies that are doing that and looking to expand, I think we talked with a company a few weeks ago that had questions on community engagement because they wanted to do a project in New Mexico, and we were like, well, then you need to talk with that community specifically, like not just us, like the state will do what we can to support, but you really do need to connect directly with that community to let them know like what you're trying to achieve. So like, I think that there's definitely room in LIDA there. I think it's like finding the companies, because usually those numbers have to be really big capital investment, big job creation, etc. But thank you all for this discussion. I've heard Tom Solomon's name come up in another conversation I had with someone on sustainability and kind of like ESG goals. So that would be great to kind of learn more about what 350 is doing at some point, and I'll just look out to connect with you on that. Otherwise, thank you all for your time, and to Somos for hosting us and offering language interpretation. Really appreciate that. Language accessibility is on our radar and on the budget. And unfortunately, I'm not the one in charge of the budget, so I can't make executive decisions, but we are thinking about that, and we're trying to explore ways to really open up that access without necessarily taxing like our staff with doing it, since it's not directly what they've been asked, not directly what they've been charged with. So we're working on it in a lot of different ways, and just thank you for accommodating us and helping us to open up this meeting for folks today. Is there any other comments before I entertain a motion to adjourn? Seeing none, may I have a motion to adjourn?
Chairwoman, I move we adjourn.
Thank you. So moved. I'm not remembering now if it actually needs a second because it's a motion to adjourn. If anyone knows Robert's Rules of Order off the top of their head. Thank you, Patricia. I saw a hand. We'll pretend that that's the second. All in favor? No discussion needed on this point. Okay, any opposed?
Aye.
All right, thank you, everyone. We'll adjourn this meeting at 10:50 a.m. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.